Bum bum ba bum 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 bum. Greetings, Gryffindors,
Slytherins,
Hufflepuffs,
Ravenclaws,
and those who have yet to make up their minds.
I'm Molly.
And I'm Alex.
And this is
PotterWatch.
So we decided to start PotterWatch because we're both longtime fans of Harry Potter. So I know for me, the first time I read the Harry Potter books was when my mom read them out loud to my sister and I. And she read the first one out to us when I think I was around like 7 or 8. So I just always remember that, her reading it out loud, and then I just got like hooked, watched the first movie, was scared to death, but still continued to read the books.
Yeah, similar. My mom read the first one to me. She's still very proud of that fact. She's always bragging about how she started this obsession that I have. And I guess after the first one, when I was little, I'm dyslexic, so I didn't like to read. I really only liked to be read to. And my mom told me that she wasn't going to read me the second book, that I had to read it for myself. And that was what really got me into Harry Potter, because I was so obsessed with it that I made myself read it.
Yeah, I think my mom might have read the second one out to us too, but at some point I like surpassed her and my sister, and I would read ahead, and like we'd go to the midnight book premieres after I think the 5th one came out, and like I would get to read it first, and then my sister and my mom would read it. But yeah, so we both have been fans for a long time, so we just finally decided to talk about it on a podcast.
Yes.
Might just be for us, but hopefully some people will be listening.
Yeah, hopefully you like it. Definitely our friends better like it. That's a warning.
So let's just jump right in with the first chapter.
So basically the concept of what we're doing is we'll go through each book chapter by chapter, and we're going to discuss in depth what each chapter is talking about, how we felt about it.
Yeah, we've got some like fun games to play. We actually both listened to the audiobook. I've actually listened to the audiobook like probably more times than I've read the book because I love Jim Dale. So we want to incorporate some clips and things like that to kind of keep it interesting.
Keep it fresh.
And Alex just listened to the audiobooks.
Yeah, I had only read them like 1,000 times, and I just graduated and I started a new job, and I was like, oh, I have a really long commute. How do I make this better? And I listened to all of them on audiobook for like my first month of driving, and it was amazing, and I re-fell in love with them, and there were a lot of highway cries.
And I've pretty much been telling Alex to listen to the audiobooks since I met her, and we realized that we both love Harry Potter. And I was like, you have to listen to the audiobook. And she's like, okay, whatever. And then finally, like 4 years later,
I listened, and I love them, and I admit I was wrong. Like we said, we're starting with the first chapter of the first book, which we're going to give you a small synopsis just so you know what we're talking about, because we're going to be jumping around a lot. You start out with Mr. Dursley. He's going to work. You see his mundane life. Then it goes quickly into McGonagall as a cat and her talking to Dumbledore about everything that's happening in the wizarding world. And it ends with Hagrid bringing Harry and them leaving Harry on the Dursleys' doorstep.
So the first chapter, The Boy Who Lived, I wish that when I was rereading it this time, I was just thinking like more in depthly, and I was just thinking I wish that this chapter had come back at the end of the books, and like they had named a chapter "The Boy Who Lived."
Oh,
like the chapter at the end of the series.
Oh, yes. I thought you meant at the end of this book.
No. Which I guess we should also say that there will be spoilers.
Yeah, sorry. We feel as if we can't talk about the things that we really love about it without talking about things that happen later. So if you haven't read any of the books, this is probably not for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both agree that J.K. Rowling is like brilliant and just laid these beautiful foreshadows. Maybe intentionally, maybe not. That's probably something we'll debate.
Yeah.
But can't really talk about the book without thinking about things that are going to happen in the future. And the first thing I thought of was like that one of those last chapters should have been called The Boy Who Lived, I think.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Maybe the chapter after he dies.
Yes, perhaps.
Perchance.
Since he lived.
One of the things that stood out to me about this chapter was that it's such a strange way to start a children's book because it doesn't have any children in it, really. Like, he doesn't have Harry in it. It doesn't even have Dudley in it.
Well, he's like a baby.
He's a child. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, he
Yeah.
can't, like, you're
He's
not
not a
in
character.
Yeah, you're not in Harry's point of view yet. You're in the point of view of, like, a curmudgeon-y old adult, and then McGonagall's point of view, which, when McGonagall and Dumbledore come in this chapter, it starts to get more magical, but I think to really grip a child's attention, it's like a strange way to start the book. And I appreciate it as an adult because it sets the world. It's really
But yeah, for a child, it's really kind of a boring first
chapter for a kid's
But
book.
I do just want to take a moment and play one of my, like, favorite quotes.
They were perfectly normal, thank you very much.
I just think that's, like, such a funny line
Yeah.
from the book. Like, perfectly normal, thank you very much.
Yes.
It's just one of my
There's
favorites.
another one in the that's another thing that I love about these books is the narrator is so sassy and it feels like I'm talking like J.K. Rowling is watching this world. I know that sounds weird, but
She's
her-
like the one narrating, at least this chapter, because later on it's Harry's point of view. Well, like limited Harry's point of view. But yeah, I agree. I feel like it's her just trying to like judge the Dursleys.
Yeah, there's one oh, it's when Dumbledore first when Hagrid first comes in and they're describing him, and the description like is clearly from an outsider's point of view because Dumbledore and McGonagall have seen Hagrid. They've met Hagrid before. So when J.K. Rowling as narrator author is like, he's just so big, it shouldn't be allowed.
Yes.
I always laugh because I just think it's so cute. It's such good narration.
And another thing when I was rereading this was I just love this whole chapter about the Dursleys. Like the Dursleys are like the worst, but I love this description of them and I wish it had been included in the movies, just like showing their little mundane life of Mr. Dursley going to work at Grunnings. Like,
yeah,
that's so funny.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like I appreciate this chapter so much more as an adult than I do as a child. Because even like they have a secret that happens, that little quote, like, and the Dursleys, they're perfectly normal, but they have this secret and they would rather and not anyone find out about it. Like, it's so much delayed. Like, you're like, oh, what's the secret? Like, it's clearly about magic because you know you're going into Harry Potter, but what is it? And I feel like kids just don't pick up on that.
Yeah, because the first time you're reading, you probably wouldn't pick up on that because you don't find out about Harry being a wizard until I think it's the 5th book, The Keeper of the Keys.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that something's up, but you don't know what it is. And I love her ability to write mystery, which I'm sure is why she decided to write that mystery series. But I think that especially the first couple books are definitely like mysteries, like Chamber of Secrets, trying to figure out who it is.
Yeah. And she's really good at writing it. And she's really good at writing it without having unnecessary, like, ooh, gotcha moments. Like, you genuinely are trying to figure it out the whole time.
It's subtle.
And the red herrings, I guess, are not like, oh wow, you just lied to me. You blatantly put this obstacle in our place.
We'll be talking about red herrings. I've got one of my own in Diagon Alley chapter. Stay tuned. So one thing, I'm just going through the book right now, and I just needed to pull out this quote because for a long time I had misunderstood this whole thing, so I'm just gonna play it.
A cat reading a map. For a second, Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he had seen, and then he jerked his head around to look again. There was a tabby cat standing on the corner of Privet Drive, but there wasn't a map in sight.
So for a long time, I just thought that the cat was like reading like a sign, because I think they say she was reading a sign later, but I never even thought that it was like a paper map until I read the illustrated version of the first book, and it shows the cat having like an actual paper map, and I was like, Oh my God, that's so obviously like that's what the cat was reading. But this whole time I'm thinking it's like a tube map or something like that, like a bus map. And it's like a small thing, but it's just something like I feel like I pick up new things every time I read these books, even though I've read them or listened to them so many times now.
Humble brag. She has that illustrated version because I purchased it for her as a
Truth.
graduation gift.
Truth.
It's also beautiful. We're not being paid to advertise that
But we
version.
will take money to advertise it.
Yes, it's beautiful, and they just came out with Chamber of Secrets.
So now I guess we're in the book where like Mr. Dursley's like seeing people in like cloaks and things like that. And I just had a question while I was reading this. Does Mr. Dursley hate the cloaks and stuff because of magic? Because he knows about it? Or does he hate it just because he just hates things that are weird?
When I'm listening to this or reading it, I interpret it to mean that he hates things that are out of the usual, and I also think that at this point in Mr. Dursley's life, he hasn't come into contact with any wizards. He just I feel like Petunia just gave him an overview. This is what is my family's dark secret, and they didn't talk about it much. You know what I'm saying?
So do you think he must have met Lily and James though?
Yeah, but I don't take them for people who are like wearing cloaks, like especially
Right.
Lily, who was not raised in.
Which that just calls into question, like we need a flashback of Vernon Dursley learning about magic for the first time.
It also brings into question the rules of this world. See, here's what I don't understand. It seems as if like young, and this could just be because the movies do it this way, and I've just accepted this as truth. Like, when do you transition from you're a child wearing your school uniform to, because like the Weasley children don't wear robes when they're just hanging around
They wear
the
like
burrow. They wear like
sweaters,
muggle clothes.
jumpers.
But they like don't, but in the books, they're like, wizards apparently have no idea how a muggle dresses.
Yeah, that's a good point, but I think that might be the movies doing that more.
Yeah.
But I do think that they are showing that young people in general can like pick things up better, because I think they talked about how the Weasley kids can
Yeah, I mean that makes
figure
sense.
out
I'm just
clothes
confused. Like Mrs. Weasley makes them the sweaters every year. Are they wearing those sweaters with like, what does wizard pants look like that they are so confused by jeans?
I know, because the whole Wizarding World Cup thing and no one knows how to dress.
Yeah, it's just like, it's a quirky thing about the world, which I think is really cute, but I also don't know. I feel like we don't see enough of the wizarding people wearing their robes, or when we do, it's not really discussed very much. I don't have a good image of what that looks like.
I always think that wizards like just don't have common sense. And I think that's like mostly showcased by Ron. Just like not having common sense about, and Harry too, who grew up in a muggle. Maybe that's like a boy.
It's just boys.
Because Hermione
Gender doesn't
definitely
exist,
has Hermione definitely has common sense, but
that also could just be like a Hermione thing. I feel like
Yeah.
I didn't have very much common sense when I was 11 through
True.
22.
But I mean, even like the adults, they just don't think about muggle things at all. I'm like, but you live among muggles.
Yeah, why? Okay, first of all, I think a lot. I mean, I guess technology aside, because technology doesn't work with magic. Okay, good. Smart J.K. Rowling. Now we can have nobody having a cell phone. Great. But why doesn't Harry, like, pull out a pen? He's always, like, dipping his quill in ink, and every time I'm like, that must be annoying. You use pencils on a daily basis when you're home.
Yeah, you never hear about him comparing Hogwarts to his own life before, which I kind of like because it just pulls you into that
the
world.
Yeah.
But for us mere mortals, we want to know every comparison like possible.
And this is funny because I had a similar conversation with my friend last night where she was like, she doesn't buy the American Hogwarts stuff because the culture of England or the UK, apologies, and America are so different that she's just like, it just wouldn't work the first way. She was like, the same way. She was like, American students weren't gonna use a quill and ink. They weren't going to like give up their cell phones. Like America figured out years ago how to do magic with technology, and she was making the argument that American wizards would not be able to keep contained their magic. Like they would just do it all over the place and people would just ignore it. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe. I could also see like wizards even in America just being their own culture, and
yeah,
I guess maybe you're speaking more to like Muggle-borns in the American world.
I guess her point was, and I'm not saying it was just an interesting point that she brought up of culture. I guess she was saying that the wizard community in America, because in JK's mind, she brought the wizard community, wizard culture from Europe to America. So she's saying that the American culture would have seeped in, and the line between Muggle-borns and wizards would be almost in nothing. You know what I'm saying? It would be more like the cultures combined.
Yeah,
because
I know, I get what you're saying. That also just makes me think, like, in this beginning chapter, they're talking about all these guys in cloaks around. I'm like, since when are there so many wizards in the Muggle world? Like, why are they all on the street? I know they're celebrating and everything, but why are they just, like, randomly out on the street?
I think this is another world question, because technically there are only, like, 2 wizard-only places in
Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense, because I feel like it'd be overcrowded all the time.
Well, I guess it is described as well, Hogsmeade's not as much.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I just feel like where are they all living? I guess you can, like, Sirius lives in between 2 Muggle, like, apartments.
And, like, the Weasleys and the Lovegoods, they all, in the Diggories.
They just live, I guess, in off places.
Again, well, UK, I feel like there's more countryside, but really the United States has a lot of countryside in the Midwest and things like that. We're from Maryland, so I think of it very condensed, and don't see where wizards could hide.
Yeah, that's true.
We might be looking too much into
it. We should it's a magical world. Everyone's happy.
We accept you, J.K. Rowling, in all of the world you created.
Yeah, just a disclaimer. We love these books. We're nitpicking,
but because we love them.
Yeah.
So another little quote I just wanted to say was Mr. Dursley referring to Petunia's sister, and he says if he'd had a sister like that.
Yes.
But like that's such a subtle hint to his own sister, who we're gonna meet in the 3rd book.
Oh yeah, his sister that he loves,
who is so awful. Like, and he just thinks that Lily, sweetest person, I'm assuming, don't get enough Lily action, but I just thought that was a little funny. I don't know if she was already thinking about Dear Marge or not, but I just thought that was maybe a little hint.
I had not even thought about Marge, so I think that's such a funny...
I was deep cuts.
Ugh.
Which I'm just going to talk about Mr. Dursley the whole time. Although the first half of the chapter is pretty focused on Vernon. It just follows him.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, like, he's not that dumb. Like, he's kind of smart. And I think that this maybe showcases it a little bit.
Mr. Dursley sat frozen in his armchair, shooting stars all over Britain, owls flying by daylight, mysterious people in cloaks all over the place, and a whisper about the Potters.
Yeah, I just think he's, like, putting it all together. And, I mean, Vernon's kind of portrayed as a blundering idiot, kind of, like, later on. But he like, knows what's up. And obviously he knows about magic, so he's, like, kind of paranoid. But I think not everyone would kind of put that together, just those couple of things.
I also think this is such a good way to foreshadow how Harry is going to be treated in this world. Like, it sets up the Dursley family so well. Like, they're such prominent characters in my mind of this book, and you really only get to see them for, like, the first
chapter, maybe?
Chapter or
in
two
the rest of the books.
Of each book. But they're characterized so well.
I really like And I think it's like you said, going back, I really like reading this chapter and just getting that background on the Dursleys. And then we kind of get more on Petunia in the 7th book. And this is more about Vernon. I mean, I don't see him having that interesting of a childhood. Like, I don't need to know.
Oh, I love when you get to know more about Petunia. I think it doesn't redeem her at all. If anything, it sort of, it makes me be like, gosh, so petty. But I think it's such an interesting way to do why she's so bitter this whole time. Like her writing letters to Hogwarts asking her to get in.
It's so sad.
It's sad. I would do that because I'm so obsessed with all that magic and the supernatural. If I had a sibling, like if my brother got into Hogwarts and I didn't, I would be so upset.
I would be pissed.
I'd be miserable, and that would cloud the way I grew up.
I would be angry towards them also.
Yeah.
Like, just resentful. But so just another thing that I think is a little different about this chapter in particular is, as we were talking about earlier, the narrator is more involved. And there's one thing that really popped out to me that doesn't really come up again in like later books or even later chapters.
He couldn't see how he and Petunia could get mixed up in anything that might be going on. He yawned and turned over. It couldn't affect them. How very wrong he was.
Like, who knows that he's wrong? Like, who's saying that? Which I know it's different because later on we're getting only what Harry knows, but can you imagine if that narrator was later on? It's like, but who knows? Sirius couldn't really be in the Department of Mysteries.
Yeah.
Like where the reader would know ahead of time. I think this is unique maybe to this chapter. I can't remember if it comes up later.
It might come up in like that chapter in the 6th book, the way they started.
The Ministers.
The Ministers.
Right.
And it might come up in those beginning chapters that are usually not
separate.
Yeah. But even in those, it follows a very specific person. Like, ministers follow the different ministers, and whatever the chapter is where you meet, where Snape is talking to Narcissa, is that also in the 6th? You're in
Narcissa's,
right?
Well, because you follow Bellatrix and Narcissa.
Yeah, you're in Narcissa's point of view. So it's just, she's very clear that she wants to do like point of view. So I think you're right. This is unique to this chapter.
It's also a transition because it's going from where Dursley's to Dumbledore and McGonagall.
Yeah, and it's McGonagall's point of view. I also think that transition is so pretty. Do you have it? We can just read it. Okay, so anyway, I'll describe it. The cat, you go from Mr. Dursley looking at McGonagall outside the window, and then she flows really like sneakily into being like, and then the cat thought this, and you immediately go into McGonagall's point of view, which
I thought it was all from Dumbledore's point of view, kind of.
Because she calls it, and this is something I noticed this time and not the other times, she calls it a put-outer, and Dumbledore knows it's a deluminator. So she like is the one doing it because she's never seen this object before, so she's describing things like,
I'm not really, I kind of think it's just omniscient because it says a man appeared on the corner the cat had been watching. So it's kind of talking about both of them from above.
that's true.
But still, I'm glad you brought this up because, again, just going to gush on J.K. Rowling and her like ability to just describe things. And her description of Dumbledore, I think, just pegs him so well that the movies definitely were never able to capture, especially perhaps the second Dumbledore.
We shan't linger on that. I'm sure it'll come up again at Goblet of Fire.
It will most definitely come up. But this is the description.
He was tall, thin, and very old, judging by the silver of his hair and beard, which were both long enough to tuck into his belt. He was wearing long robes, a purple cloak that swept the ground, and high-heeled, buckled boots. His blue eyes were light, bright, and sparkling behind half-moon spectacles, and his nose was very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore.
Yeah, so I just love it. I love her descriptions, and that's just like one example, obviously. And Dumbledore just such an important character throughout the books, and I think that introduction, and it maintains through every book. She always describes the twinkling eyes and the broken nose, twice broken.
The half moon spectacles that he's peering over.
Right.
Yeah.
Never can really capture that because it's just, I mean, obviously a book is different.
Yeah, and she's described, which is, I feel like, was hard for all the actors. And first Dumbledore, I'm not trying to hate on second Dumbledore, but first Dumbledore, he really, I think he captured it more, there's this, like, fun-loving, just, like, old man thing that he captures. He's like, little mischievous.
I think he captures the tenderness of Dumbledore, but I always question whether Richard Harris would have been able to do like the 6th book and being able to go and get a Horcrux.
I agree. I don't think he would have been able to do that. And
I didn't want Michael Gambit or Gambin.
Yeah.
I wanted somebody else.
Yeah, it's hard because Dumbledore is so complex. It's such a hard part to play because Dumbledore present is so opposite of Dumbledore in the past. He's like very fun-loving. He has all these quirky little, like, his passwords are always like he's into
lemon drops.
Yeah, he's into sweets and he's goofy and he has that line.
But he's also like a badass.
Yeah,
even in like the later books.
Yeah, but it's like when he gets angry, it like triggers that old version of himself. And
for the greater good.
And it's hard, I feel like, for an actor to play that because you never see the in-between that got him to that place. You only see,
especially because he's not the main character. It's
right.
All...
And he's like 100-something
he's
years old.
Like 150.
So it's like you have so much time that you have to make up for, and in between years like 50 and 70 is when I feel like that change happened.
Right. Totally agree. So do you have any, I mean, I have some more notes, but I didn't want to step on your toes if you had any you wanted to bring up. Oh, well, what about, like, why was McGonagall sitting on that stoop all day? Like, there was no reason for it.
I thought about this, too. This is in my notes, too. And I have reasoned that it's because McGonagall's smart. Like, she'd heard these rumors, and so I think she knew that this is where the family would be.
Well, I think that maybe she and Dumbledore had agreed to meet there later, but why did she have to be there?
Because I think she was watching, because she had heard that the rumors that...
And he does say, fancy seeing you here, so it wasn't like they had planned it.
Yeah, but I think she had heard the rumors and was like, okay, this is their only living relative. I'm sure she's second principal
and she
of the
knows
school.
Lily and James.
Yeah, so I'm sure she just did her little McGonagall research and was like, I need to check out who's going to be looking after.
She knows what's up.
Speaking of the stoop, I've decided to add a little segment to this. Yes, I've decided to add a segment, which I think is necessary as we continue through these books. It is the Dumbledore child neglect segment. Why is he... We're going to count them, and I'm going to see. First of all, this child has just escaped death, and you have decided to leave him on a stoop. You're like, oh... When they wake up in the morning and find the baby.
Hope he doesn't cry in the middle of the night or gets hungry.
It's night. Like, you're just gonna leave. Even if he wasn't being haunted by the darkest wizard of all time, which you, Dumbledore, yourself don't believe is fully dead, and he didn't have hundreds of followers. Even if this was a normal baby, you can't just leave them outside in the cold. My note is he cold? Why didn't we ring a doorbell?
Well, it is July.
Why didn't we ring a doorbell?
Or no, it's October. It's October 31st or November 1st. So yeah, it's like winter.
Yeah. Is he gonna get eaten alive by mosquitoes? What's happening, Dumbledore?
Other animal?
You could have rang the doorbell. That's what's funny.
Maybe he had Mrs. Fig's cats on it. You know, she's still living there. Or maybe she had just been placed there. Or, like, why couldn't have McGonagall spent the whole night there as a cat? But she leaves. She dips.
They leave that baby there. And I'm sitting here like, this is such foreshadowing to the neglect of the rest of the series. Like, who did this? Who was like, oh yeah, the baby, we left him on the doorstep all night. It says in the morning when they wake up, Mrs. Dursley
Screams.
will scream.
Understandable, honestly. But, that reminds me, I'm so glad you brought this up, because if Dumbledore was going to, sacrifice him, he couldn't have given him a little better of a childhood. Can you just imagine, paint a picture.
I'm ready.
If he had given him to McGonagall to raise, because McGonagall wouldn't have spoiled him. Like, he wouldn't have been like, oh, I'm famous Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my Harry Potter boy.
Very good. Beautiful.
She would have been like telling him exactly how he was gonna act. He still would have been like a good person.
I think the point was he wanted him to be raised by
Muggles.
People who wouldn't know the magical world. Also, this comes up later, but Dumbledore does say the reason he had to leave him with Petunia is because the protection spell via the bloodline.
Good point. I know that, but didn't even think about that when I was reading that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to imagine McGonagall raising Harry, because that would have been adorable, especially when like McGonagall's backstory with like how sad her love life is.
I just also think McGonagall raising Harry reminds me a little bit of like Miss Honey and Matilda. Like you just want them to
Great
be like
reference.
this happy. Thanks.
Yes.
But yeah, so if you're gonna keep track with us, that is 1 for the Dumbledore neglect count.
I just want to keep talking about foreshadowing, because
Please
I think
do.
it's great. So young Sirius Black lent it to me. The motorbike. What did she know about Sirius at the time? Did she know the 3rd book's plot? I want to know. I want to know.
Can you show me?
Love. Okay. Yeah, I just needed to know that.
Young Sirius Black. She had to know because she wrote the last chapter first. So I feel like she had
this book?
Of all of the books.
No.
Not the 19 years later. She wrote the last chapter. That's what she said in her autobiography.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And that's the chapter she showed to like her friend or whatever, the friend who was like, this is a magical story. You have to write this into a book.
Wow. No, I didn't know.
Yeah,
but
she wrote...
is Sirius in the last chapter?
No, but I think because she like went backwards. I think she knew
planned.
She didn't know everything. Like we all know the Thestrals.
Just called it. I mean, she tried to like explain it, but just say you made a mistake, because that's some bull.
Yeah,
some bullshit.
Like with Cursed Child, just say you made a mistake.
Oh, we'll get to that, because I can't even talk about that. Yeah, not a fan though.
Oof. We have strong feelings. We will not hold back.
We'll probably do a special episode on Cursed Child.
Yeah.
I need some time before I reread it.
I think at the end of all of them, we'll do it like it's the final installment, which is what J.K. Rowling has billed it as, even though I'm not really accepting that.
I think that was my major points.
Those are my major points, too. I'm glad that you brought up the Hagrid nod to Sirius.
Yeah. I feel like we didn't really talk about Hagrid that much.
Oh, yeah. This is also such a great introduction to Hagrid because it shows all of Hagrid's, like, key personality points. He's nurturing. And you already trust Dumbledore at this point. And then Dumbledore says, I would trust Hagrid with my life, which I think is such a big standout line.
Right.
And
I think Hagrid really kind of gets the shaft later on in the books when, like, more intricate characters are introduced. And Harry becomes closer to Lupin and to obviously Sirius. And, I mean, Hagrid's still obviously a character, but I think his presence in Harry's life gets less.
I agree, but I think it's because Harry's, like, what is that word?
Wanderlust?
Yeah, Wanderlust becomes less... Hagrid becomes less... magical, less marvelous, because he is sort of bumbling, and Harry starts, as he gets older, he starts to pity him.
Exactly, which makes me sad.
So it makes me sad, and it's
like the 4th book on, because that's also when he finds out that he's half giant, which I don't think is why he's pitying him, but he's pitying him for how Hagrid reacts to everyone finding out that he's half giant. That's when he's like getting read a Skeeter articles about
Yeah.
him. And I mean, the
they
audience is
already-
also pitying him.
And it's after 3,
Which is when
Harry, he doesn't like him as a teacher, and
but
he's
that's
really
so
he's,
comical.
yeah, and he's fighting to like. I feel he loves Hagrid all the way
Definitely.
through, but I feel like he's fighting to like see Hagrid as still this like the giant magical figure that he was when he first met him, because he's the first magical person he really meets.
Right.
And he's
exactly. That's important.
and that's why he's so defensive to Malfoy and Madame Malkins when Malfoy's like, oh, that bumbling, oh,
Right.
whatever.
Which he'll still defend Hagrid
To the depth.
no
To the
matter
depth.
what book you're in. But yeah, I think you're right. He becomes less
Enchanted by Hagrid, which
Exactly.
is, it is sad. And it's
but also kind of understandable.
it's realistic, I think. That happens
Definitely.
to me. There are people that I'm like, oh, wow, you're not as,
Yeah.
that happens with our parents,
Right.
and Hagrid is sort of a semi-father figure.
Like uncle.
One of the, uncle figure. One chapter in the Seven Harrys in the 7th book
Right.
is when everyone's trying to figure out who betrayed them, who like told the secret.
And they all think it's Hagrid.
Well,
except for
I don't.
Harry.
I think it's the opposite. Nobody really thinks it's Hagrid. Like, they all think it's like Mundungus. Like, they're all trying to figure out who it is. And then Harry, in his own point of view, is like, I thought back to the guy who accidentally told
About the
Voldemort about the
dragon.
dragons. And he's like, I want to stop trying to figure out who it is because Harry thinks it's Hagrid.
Interesting.
Which is-
we'll have to talk about that more in the 7th book.
Yeah, just...
But
and
that's
so,
really interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, but I love Hagrid. I think he's really sweet. I think that it is I think I agree that it's a good introduction to Hagrid, and I'm sure we'll talk about him more, especially in Keeper of the Keys.
Yeah. We're Hagrid fans
Right.
in this podcast.
So I think that will bring us to a new segment.
Yeah. Bum bum ba bum 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 bum.
We're going to start our trivia round right now. So Alex and I have each picked out a quote, or we've each picked out 2 quotes for the other one to finish it or fill in the blank to try and see who knows their Harry Potter trivia better. So I'm going to do...
Which is a matter of pride, honestly. I'm going to be embarrassed if I do not get these correct.
So here's the first one.
Come to think of it, he wasn't even sure his nephew was called Harry. He'd never even seen the boy. It might have been...
Can you finish that quote?
I don't think I can. Oh, boy.
I'll give you a hint. There's two parts to the... It's 2 names.
Yeah.
5,
Oh
4.
my gosh, stop. It
3.
might have been Harvey or... All right, play the answer. I don't know.
He'd never even seen the boy. It might have been Harvey or Harold.
Oh, see, I was going to say Harold, but then I was like, Harold is too close to Harry. It's like Harry
It
is
is
short
the
for
same.
Harold. It's the same thing.
I know, but you did pretty well. You got one of them.
I'm so mad at myself.
I did. That was, I guess, kind of a trick because I did too. But
It's fine. I do. My first one is a 2-parter too, so I can't even call it a trick. But you're gonna get it.
I know we said we weren't going to be too hard on each other this first one, but I wasn't sure how hard that was. But...
No, that's a good one. All
right, here we go.
Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called...
Grunnings,
which made...
drills. Cool.
Check, win. 10 points to Ravenclaw.
That was easier.
It was easy. 10 points to Ravenclaw.
Okay, let's see the next one.
No, sir. House was almost destroyed, but I got him out all right before the muggles started swarming around. He fell asleep as we was flying...
Over Bristol.
Nice. Yeah.
He fell asleep as we was flying over Bristol.
Woo!
All right, so let's do my second one.
There will be books written about Harry. Every child...
And our world will know his name.
Yeah. I did them really easy. I wasn't sure.
Did this one have 2 parts also?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to do our chapter champion and our
Reading rats.
which, if you haven't gotten to the third or fourth book, chapter champion is a reference to the Triwizard Champion.
And reading rat is a reference to my personal he who must not be named, Peter Pettigrew, that rat. Thou who shall not be Gryffindor. I don't know. I hate him. Anyway,
So we're just going to pick a character that we think was the best and the worst. And at least for me, when I say the best character, I don't always mean like they're a great person, but I think they were just like the best character in the chapter.
yes, agreed.
Just to be clear. So my chapter champion is my boy Vernon Dursley.
Yes. Good thing you prefaced that with your doesn't have to be a great person.
Because we know he's not fantastic, child abuser, whatever. But Vernon Dursley is the chapter champion, I think, all that grunning's worth.
Yes. My chapter champion is Hagrid because it just always warms my heart when he brings Harry in and he's crying at saying goodbye to Harry, and then it harkens back to later when he comes to take him to Hogwarts. I just think that introduction to Hagrid is so beautiful.
I think that's great. Vernon should probably be the reading rat, but I stand by him as the chapter champion.
No, I love it because I also did like Vernon. I love this little glimpse of Vernon.
Yeah. So do you want to say your reading rat?
Yeah, my reading rat is baby Dudley, who's kicking people at 1 year old and being just the worst little shit. Get out.
He learned his first
word,
word,
won't.
Or in the British version, shan't.
Oh! We should have little
fun factoids.
Yeah. Fun fact, my office does a Secret Santa, and I asked for Philosopher's Stone for my Secret Santa gift. We write down what we want, and I wrote down Philosopher's Stone because I have all the other British versions in first edition, but I don't have that one.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in the illustrated version that it says shan't. But yeah, Dudley was my reading rat as well, even though we barely talked about him and he's literally in it for a sentence.
He's
2 sentences.
The worst. Anyway.
And continues to be until about the 7th book.
Yeah, when he says, "You're not a waste of space."
Right.
That one line. JK, again, making a character redeemable with one line of text.
He really shouldn't be redeemable.
At all. But in my head, fun fact, I write fan fiction. In my fan fiction, in future lives, Harry has a good relationship with Dudley.
What? She kind of alludes to that.
Right.
Doesn't, or she says it in a post.
Yeah, one of her post-book
mentions. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what to call
Snippets.
those. Her officially unofficial things that she says about the world.
Yeah. So we're also going to rename each chapter, not because we have a problem with what JK named the chapters, because we just think it would be fun to rename the chapters in a funny or something like that. So what did you have, Alex?
I had, before I decided to do the Dumbledore neglect count, my chapter title was Dumbledore's First Neglect.
Oh, nice. I think mine probably would have been The Boy Who Was Left Behind.
So we both. Oh, that one's deep though, because it's his parents left him behind because they died.
Ouch.
And then,
so I don't know if ours is that funny, but
look, our first game, instead of the quotes, was going to be funniest moment. Fun fact, there aren't very many in the first chapter.
Okay, so this was my idea to do funniest moment in the first chapter, and I did actually have a funny line, but it's not really haha funny. It's just me and my weird sense of humor thought it was funny, and it's only, again, my boy Vernon. And it's the description of his beefy neck.
It's awful. Oh, but I also love Petunia's description where it's
Who
like
is blonde in the book. Note that.
it's like she has like it compares his beefy neck to her long neck, which she uses to spy on the neighbors, which is also such a great description of who Petunia is.
And they both have, I think, are in different books described as having twice the amount of normal neck, but Petunia's is long and Vernon's is wide.
Oh my god.
So that would have been my funniest moment. But maybe we'll do funniest moment in another chapter.
Yeah.
The next chapter is pretty funny, The Vanishing Glass.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about that.
You also get your first brush with Sassy Harry, which is my favorite.
Favorite Harry, except for you hate the 5th book, so...
I hate the 5th book not because of Harry. I like Harry in the 5th book. I actually don't
Even
think
though he's
moody.
moody?
Yeah, I don't hate his whininess. I hate the 5th book because I think it's uncomfortable to be with Umbridge for that amount of time.
True. So because we are called PotterWatch, if you have read the 7th book, which I hope all of you have, they do, on their radio show, they have a password for the next week. So we'll just say what our password for the next chapter will be. So you guys will know when to tune in, although with the podcast, we're going to put it out regardless. But just a fun little thing for us to have.
Yeah, and later on, if more than my dog starts listening to this, if you can give the chapter, you'll get to like request a game that we play or something that we talk about later. There will be little treats.
So the password for the next episode of the podcast will be the number of presents that Dudley
Initially receives.
right, that he threw a little tantrum over.
Because our reading rat just
Is
doesn't know
a
how to
rat.
quit.
We'll try not to repeat reading rats too much, but who knows?
Who knows? Dudley might be
Dud.
my next week too.
Although my champion could turn into a rat pretty soon.
Understandable.
Stay tuned. So our last thing we're gonna do before ending is award points to the chapter. So this is something we're gonna do at the end of every chapter. And as it is in the books, our points may be kind of arbitrary. You know, you get 5 points for killing a troll, you get 50 points for being out of bed. You know, numbers don't really make
You
sense
lose
in the
50
books.
points for killing Fred. No big deal.
What?
Huh?
Oh,
Later.
I was actually referring to things that happen in the book, though. Like J.K. Rowling.
Oh no,
is
I
like-
know, but I'm just saying in coming months I might take away 50 points.
That's like 1,000,000 points
For killing
subtracted. But so for this chapter, I think I will give a solid 50 points
to JK.
To JK / my house, which is Ravenclaw.
All right. I feel like we can't give them to houses because then I'm just gonna be like, I give 100 points to
All right,
Gryffindor.
Fine, I'm gonna give 50 points to the Dursleys because this chapter really is about or just number 4 Privet Drive.
Yeah, I'm gonna match your 50 for this chapter. I think it's a really clever and good way to start the book, even if it's not good for children.
It's also just the first chapter, so I think that just gives it extra points.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in reality, it's probably like a 10 to 20 point chapter.
In the big scheme of things, but it starts you off. Her first line is really great.
Yeah, it's great. I'm excited to talk about the next chapter because we get a little bit more plot and characters. We get to finally talk about Harry as a little 10-year-old.
Cutie.
When he was like sweet and not surly.
Oh, my bubba.
Oh, before he was, well, he was scarred, but so listeners, that brings us to the end of another Potter Watch.
And we'll be back next week.
People meeting in secret all over the country were holding up their glasses and saying in hushed voices, "To Harry Potter, The boy who lived.
Bum bum ba bum bum bum